All right, this is Dr. Stair again, and this is for Module 3. And I'm going to be talking to you about Erik Erikson Stage 1 and Stage 2. I'm going to have to split this into two different 12-minute videos. And this will suffice as your lecture on the first two stages of Erik Erikson's theory. I basically wore myself out typing up the Hillman notes. So I would encourage you to listen to this video and take notes from the video. I'm sorry I don't have any Blackboard or any PowerPoint for you, but all the information will be here in this video, and you can stop it and rewind at any point. Plus, it's in the couple handouts that I'm giving you. So Erik Erikson Stage 1 is trust versus mistrust. And so you're going to need to know the name of that stage. Trust versus mistrust actually runs from infancy to about 18 months or into toddlerhood. So every time we do a stage in Erikson, you want to consider that essentially we're talking about identity formation. How does physical elements, cognitive elements, and social elements or relationships, and also culture influence a child's developing ego identity. We will also throw in Hillman. You may or may not have read the Hillman lecture notes, and I really encourage you to do that. I also encourage you to read Hillman. You won't get it sufficiently if you don't, and I'm giving you time to do that. The homework will revolve around Erikson and Hillman, mostly a little bit of Piaget and attachment theory as well. So the first thing is trust versus mistrust, which is the ego identity psychological issue. So the basic task is for the child to develop as an infant and a toddler a sense of basic trust in the world, a sense that most of the time I'm essentially going to be okay. I have people who care about me. When I am in pain or discomfort and I cry out or I fuss or complain about it, depending on your age, someone or something comes to my aid, gives me attention, and then alleviates the discomfort. So Erikson called that basic trust, when essentially the pattern with the parents or the caregivers or the environment is such that relief follows discomfort in a fairly reliable way. Like if it doesn't happen all the time, that's okay. But if it happens most of the time, that's enough usually for a sense of basic trust to happen. It's like gambling, right? In other words, gamblers don't, in order to get into gambling, you don't have to win every time, right? You just got to win enough to hook you into it, to hope that the next time you will win. Now, of course, this is kind of a deformative example. How trust is like gambling. Kind of bizarre. But essentially, for basic trust or the even more well-developed sense of hope, Richard Knowles, an existential psychologist who I forgot to list in my Hillman lecture notes, basically talks about, oh, actually Erikson does too. For every stage of development, including stage 1, there is a virtue that develops. And for stage 1, hope would be that virtue. But hope is itself based on trust. So you kind of have enough, you have to have enough experience of basic trust to develop kind of an enduring sense of hope that essentially things may suck now, but they will get better. Or that sense of basic hope that, you know, when I walk out the door today, I'm not going to get hit by a meteorite or a Toyota and die. And that when my children leave the house, that's not going to happen to them either. I mean, you don't really realize how much trust and faith and hope humans use on a daily basis. And if we don't have enough trust. Then we live in anxiety and fear. And this can develop from childhood. I mean, we can have bad experiences in infancy and early toddlerhood where we basically learn that life is about more or less kind of an unending physical and emotional discomfort. And that being comforted and being taken care of is not something that we can depend on. So we learn to have a basic mistrust. So Erik Erikson, I think he was really on the mark here, talking about trust and mistrust as being foundational for the human psyche. A sense that we want our children to develop a sense of basic trust, which comes from the social interaction with people. When we are physically uncomfortable or emotionally uncomfortable, we cry or fuss or act out. You know, infants don't have language. We start getting language, you know, around 9 months, but we don't really speak that clearly until about 2 years old or even later. So, but when we call out, someone attends to us, and they do it enough that we kind of, our body gets that basic idea that comfort follows discomfort. And you know that from your own experiences, you can tolerate quite a bit of discomfort and pain if you know it's temporary, right? You know, if you get migraines regularly, it's awful, but you know it will end. When people really get frightened and scared and shut down and have to figure out various ways of coping is when the pain is unending and there's no way to count on it being over with. So let me break down this into components. When I do this face-to-face, I usually talk for a whole hour and 15 minutes about this stage, but that's just going to be too hard to do with the limitations of video that I have right now. So we're just going to do the best we can, but maybe being succinct will be helpful for you. Anyway, the physical element that feeds into ego identity is being physically vulnerable. You're an infant. You are vulnerable to dying or being hurt unless your parents take care of you. So trust is always predicated on some kind of vulnerability, and so is hope and faith. The idea that we could be hurt, we could die, we could be uncomfortable for what feels like forever. That has to be there. So it's in the face of physical need and our vulnerability as human beings, that basic trust that most of the time we're going to be okay develops. So that's the physical component. Every stage has a different physical component. For Piaget, this is a sensory motor stage. Piaget is a cognitive psychologist. I just mentioned it here. So what's going on cognitively for an infant? Well, from your book, you can tell there's actually going on a lot. But the child is actually figuring out what the world means, how it feels, what happens when you cry, and who shows up. They're basically little scientists learning about how to use the body and learning about cause and effect. If I do this, then this happens. If I do this, then this happens. It's a sensory motor stage. We don't have typically memories in infancy because you need language to hang memories on. Some people have some memories. But cognitively speaking, what happens is neurologically you get more mature, and bodily memory begins to take hold. So you remember physically, if you hit your hand on something sharp, it will hurt. So you learn not to bang your hand on, you learn not to bang your hand on the side of the bed or the side of the crib, for example. And so what actually happens cognitively is a sense of expectation. A child becomes gradually able to predict that if I do this, I'm going to get some attention. If I do that, I'm not going to get any attention. And so this sense of expectation, which is a mental set, it's a mental expectation, is what is the basis for basic hope or basic trust or basic mistrust. if a child learns that it doesn't matter what he or she does, sometimes she gets taken care of, sometimes she doesn't, it just is kind of random, or a person is neglected for a long periods of time. You're not fed, you're not changed, you're neglected. Or if a child is abused, they learn to expect pain. They learn to kind of expect being ignored, and that can create a really, really fussy baby, or it can create a baby that gives up. They did some studies in orphanages where there wasn't good one-on-one care. In orphanages, there almost never are. These were done in Russia, but I'm sure the ones here were kind of the same. If babies don't have emotional care and emotional attachment to a couple of caregivers that they become familiar with, they can, not all the time, it's still fairly rare, just basically stop eating and stop having an instinctual desire to live. In other words, they already feel as infants so hopeless that they give up eating and trying. It's called failure to thrive. So people can die, babies can die from emotional neglect. What we want by 18 months is for a child to develop a basic sense of trust, that most of the time things are going to be okay. And that comes with a comfortable, relaxed body. You know, when you feel afraid, that's not the best time to enjoy yourself, is it? Even as an adult. But if you're relaxed a lot of the time, and relaxation and good feelings, nurturing, being fed, being loved, being talked to, being cared for, follows periods of, mild discomfort or even more severe discomfort, that will set the stage for basic trust. The child cognitively will learn to expect being taken care of. And when we are taken care of, we learn that we are lovable, and we internalize those feelings, and our actual neurology memorizes all those feelings, and we go back to them over and over and over again. So when we think of dad or grandpa, we get warm feelings. If we're someone who's scared us a lot, we do the opposite. We think of Uncle so-and-so and get icky feelings. So we might not mistrust that person. So essentially you want, by the toddlerhood, a basic sense of trust in the world so that you aren't afraid all the time, aren't uncomfortable all the time, because that will create major psychological disorders often, or just a hard time in living. And it will create a harder time adjusting to the next stage, the challenges of the next stage, which are autonomy, rudimentary autonomy and independence and a sense of self, and that it's okay to do that. They'll have more shame, doubt, and fear, because if you don't get basic trust by the time you graduate into being an 18-month-old toddler, you're still going to be having those issues, plus the next set of issues that show up for toddlers, which is working on a sense of will and independence. So, you have two things you're working on instead of one, which is, multitasking is always harder for people. Many people develop a pretty advanced set of mistrust, and then they can work their way out of it in the future if they have reparative or corrective experiences. So if you know that you came out of toddlerhood with mistrust, don't worry, you weren't doomed, and you're still not doomed now. So, trust versus mistrust, basic mistrust, based in those patterns of caregiving and the ability to believe that, okay, I'm basically okay, I can survive in the world, I'm loved, I have good feelings, I can reach inside myself, and when things go badly, there is at least one person or more that will make it better for me and ultimately help me make things better for myself when I'm an adult, when I am scared. All right, so that is stage one in a nutshell. You may have to rewind this a bunch of times to get notes out of that, and that's it.